Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's my pleasure to present to you the February City Manager's Report. We'll just jump right in with dates as we usually do. As the Mayor just mentioned, we have a two-day workshop that's going on with FEMA and other members of the federal agencies, state agencies, private sector, and whatnot. The workshop will conclude tomorrow starting at 9 o'clock and go through about the 12:30 period of time. That's being held at the City Auditorium. Just a plug for the MADC, the Minot Area Development Corporation. They're going to be having their annual meeting at 11:30 at the Sleep Inn on February 8th, which is an active day for us community-wise. The State Water Commission will also be meeting in Bismarck at 1 o'clock that day. And then, of course, the State of the City address, our first ever, will be held beginning 4:15 with an open house at the Magic City campus, and then, of course, to begin officially at 5 p.m. that afternoon. The Governor's Main Street Initiative and Summit will be occurring on the 12th and 13th. There are 4 members of the staff and the elected officials that will be going down to attend that training. President's Day, our offices will be closed in observance on the 19th, and then the International Source River Board will have a public input meeting at 6 p.m. at the Grand Hotel on the 20th of this month, and then finally their regular meeting will be held all day on the 21st. Upcoming meetings for the Planning Commission will be February 26th. Committees of the whole meetings will be the 27th and 28th, and the next council meeting will be on the 5th of March. Up next, we'll talk a little bit about the landfill expansion. You've likely heard by now, as I send an email out to this effect and also a press release, the city has officially withdrawn its application for the rezone request that was submitted by the Public Works Department for the 2 sections of land that 2 quarters of land that essentially we purchased adjacent to the existing landfill last year. I wanted to provide you a bit of an update as to how we plan to move forward. The Planning Commission did recommend denial, but because we withdrew the application, there's no action on that being required by the City Council this evening. What we will be doing is meeting with various stakeholders and the community, the neighborhood, and we'll have as many public meetings as we need to have in order to try to get all the issues addressed, identified, and answered. We did hold the required meeting, which was the 300-foot proximity meeting. If you had parcel or a piece of land within 300 feet of the application boundaries, that meeting was held, did meet the statutory requirements, but we're going to go above and beyond that as it relates to interacting with the community and trying to get as many of their issues identified and addressed as possible before we take further action. Along with that, we will be conducting a cost analysis more robustly than we have, and that cost analysis will include a number of different alternatives, including also the cost analysis of a siting analysis impact on our community. There's been many that believe that we should close the landfill in its current, when it reaches its full lifespan, and then identify a new site somewhere regionally to move the landfill. So we'll be looking more closely at that and include that in the cost analysis. Whenever we get done with all of that work, and I can't tell you at this point when that will be done, we will resubmit something to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. It could be a variant of what we've already submitted. It could be the same thing. It could be something totally different. We just don't know without going through the process at this point in time. So that's the plan, at least going forward, as it relates to the activities in and around the landfill. Moving forward, I wanted to give you a brief update on flood control, separate and aside from the meetings that are occurring today regarding long-term financing for additional phases of flood control. There's been, well, and I guess that's really what I wanted to talk about, is this meeting that's happening today and tomorrow. What's really great about this is that when Senator Hoeven came to visit with representatives of the city of Minot last fall, along with FEMA Director Brock Long, he had committed to us that he wanted to help us find alternative ways to finance flood control going forward, particularly after phases 1 through 4 were completed. So he set his team to work to try to pull together this meeting, which we are now holding and hosting for the Senator on our behalf. And we're very grateful for this because we have been put in touch with a number of different agencies, and the Mayor mentioned those, as well as private sector financiers and a variety of different folks that are helping us to look at this financing challenge a little bit differently maybe than we had been in the past. So that's pretty exciting. And so we're learning a lot from this, and we're excited to conclude this activity tomorrow and then to keep the conversation going. So we're making good connections. And what's great particularly about this is that we have had representatives from all over the country come to Minot here to present on their experiences, and we're building partnerships and we're building networks, which is really fantastic. So we're really pleased with this and want to thank all the agencies for their participation, and certainly Senator Hoeven for his leadership on this. Moving forward, just a quick update on the National Disaster Resiliency Program. The downtown gathering space we're still making progress there. I think I mentioned to you last update that we are going to be sending out certified letters to the property owners to find out what their interest was in selling their sites, and this is focusing in on site number 2, which was selected by the community and the technical advisory team. All of those letters have gone out. We have received 2 favorable responses that property owners, at least in 2 of the 5, are willing to consider selling. Not that they will sell, but they're willing to consider selling. All remaining responses are due by the 15th, so we'll have more information for you probably at the next report. As it relates to the city's acquisition or buyout program, we closed on 7 properties for a total of just over $250,000, and we had 4 relocation claims for about almost $19,000 for a total of $270,000 plus. Our funds spent versus our funds remaining, this is important here on the Community Development Block Grant National Disaster Resiliency Fund. You can see here that acquisitions total 5.2, and funds remaining is just over that 5.2 mark as well. We are running into some challenges here as it relates to financing continued acquisitions. We are expecting some money to free up through the State Water Commission here, hopefully shortly, which will allow us to continue. The good news is we have the properties we need in order to start the phases that we've identified, so that is good news. There is considerable funding still available for relocation and demo, but acquisition money is drying up pretty quickly. So we've given that our attention here and are working, and have been for some time, to identify additional funds that would allow us to continue to acquire properties that we need for the future phases of flood control throughout the community. The Family Homeless Shelter is continuing with some work that's going on by a number of different nonprofits in our community that are putting together collectively a subrecipient agreement project for consideration, and we are excited to see what that looks like. They've been given 6 weeks as of the mid part of January, so we still have several more weeks to go before this proposal is due, but because we didn't get anyone to submit formally on the request for proposals for the Family Homeless Shelter, we are taking a different tact here, and we do hope that this one will be more productive for our community. I wanted to update you on a little bit on the employee side, and first start with a reorganizational proposal for your consideration this evening. This is the organizational chart for the Planning Department. The Planning Department has a total of 5 staff members in it, including the Planning Director position, which was recently vacated by Mr. Rob Davis in December. We have been talking about what to do next in regards to planning, and you may recall that back in July of last year I held a developers forum, and we've had several subsequent meetings with the Minot Area Builders, Association of Builders, and others that have given us good feedback as it relates to our development process and some challenges and issues with that process and improvements that we could make. So I took that, as well as some conversations that we've had internally, and began crafting an alternative approach to the way we consider and essentially process building and development and planning and zoning applications and processes through our city. Before I get too far into that, let me just show you on the building side. This is what the organizational chart looks like. The building official, Mitch Flanagan, has several inspectors and other support staff that report to him, and then he reports to the city engineer, Lance Meyer, who also oversees the entire engineering department. So these 2 charts here are the current organizational charts for the way we currently process planning and zoning and building plan review and building inspection and code enforcement. What I would like to do is to bring all of them together into one department and centralize all of these various activities and break down a silo and make more consistent the oversight of the entire building process. So that proposal looks like this. We essentially retitle the planning director position into a community development director, and we simply place all of the planning resources and all of the building resources under that particular director. There would be no increase to FTE counts, no increases to budget. This is essentially a title change with the merge of two separated departments that fall up under one. So again, we would be consolidating the planning and zoning, the building plan review, the building inspection, and the code enforcement activities all into one department, with the community development director heading that particular department. The nature of the work would essentially be very consistent to what we currently do, but with more broad oversight and accountability for all of the activities I've just mentioned. There's many benefits to doing this. First of all, we'd be more responsive to our community concerns. Some of the concerns we got through the Developers Forum is that we have fractionalized services. We have certain divisions and certain sections that are performing well, but cross-collaboratively there's some gaps there, so we can improve on that. We would have a one-stop shop essentially for the consolidation of these various services and processes. We'd have improved management and accountability for all of these services that are being provided, and we take a more holistic view and approach to the development process throughout the entire community. I also mentioned we'd be breaking down some silos, allowing for better cross-communication as well. I also think that there is a indirect benefit of this as well, in that we will have, I believe, an improved recruitment possibilities or potential. It's difficult to find a high-level position from around the country in a national search or even locally that will want to come in and manage a team of 3 or 4. That's very difficult to do. Most people, when they climb in their careers, are looking for more authority, more responsibility, more staff, and so on and so forth. So by consolidating these services and placing them under one department, we give that opportunity for those who might be looking for it. So I do believe that we'd have an improved recruitment potential for this particular position. And then finally, as I mentioned before, there is no net impact to the budget or the FTE count. So with that, maybe I'll pause or get your impressions. I still have a few more things I'd like to discuss with you, but I am looking for your blessing, essentially, to move forward with this so that we can draw up the Community Development Director position description and put it on the street for advertisement and begin recruiting. So I'll pause there for some questions or comments you might have.
Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mayor Barney. Tom, can you go back to previous slide so we could take a look at?
You bet.
So, in essence, Mr. Meyer then would be off in a different subset. He wouldn't have the responsibilities of working with the whole, the team, with Mr. Flanagan and all the folks beneath him as it pertains to the flow chart?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Straight, that's exactly right. We would allow our city engineer to work wholly and solely on engineering plans, projects, and services. Right now, we stretch him to work on not only those activities, but also to lead the building department as well. And so by separating this, we can get him to spend more of his time and resources on the engineering and capital programs for the city, and then allow the building official to have a resource dedicated to him that's overseeing the entire process and serve more as a resource for those processes.
Thank you.
Alderman Sipma.
Thank you. Mr. Barry, just out of curiosity, with our, for lack of a better term, archaic pay plan system that is run by a DOS software system, is there any problems that we're going to encounter with any of the changes here in the step pay plans or any of that stuff?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Sipma, the answer is no. This particular position has been reviewed preliminarily by our HR director, and it falls in line with the existing pay and classification that the planning director position was in. So we don't anticipate any adjustments needing or any complications associated with the pay plan implementation of it.
Alderman Wolski.
Mayor, thank you. Mr. Berry, any challenges you see in terms of finding an individual with kind of a broad skill set here in terms of you know, the building background as well as the planning side?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Wolski, yes, this will be a difficult position to fill. Now, not necessarily because it's a unique position. This is a position that is not new, particularly when you look nationally as to what various cities and counties are doing. They're consolidating a lot of these services in just this way we are. The challenge will be, you know, as we have experienced with other positions, it's difficult to get people to, particularly who aren't familiar with Minot or don't know about the wonderful community we have here, to put Minot on their radar. So I think it's going to be difficult that way. You know, there's all sorts of things you have to consider when you hire a new staff member. It's not just the technical competencies, it's the fit for the position, it's you know, whether it fits in their career. There's a number of those things that have to align in order to get the right person into the position. And we need to be diligent about making sure that, you know, we choose an individual that has the skill set we need, but it also has the mindset that we also want as well. So it will be difficult, just as many of our executive level positions are difficult to fill for the city.
I'll follow up on that by adding that as Mr. Berry and I discussed this plan, one of the advantages is that Mr. Berry feels that this position is going to be easier to fill than a planning director. And so, and in light of some of the other organizational challenges we have out there, I agreed that this would probably be a good solution to that. So, Alderman Sitma.
Are you looking at this time for a motion, or is just direction enough?
No, this was just this. He's doesn't need anything,
okay.
So we're good to go. Alderman Padragula.
Thank you. My initial impression is pretty positive. I would want to solicit the input of the engineering department, but I don't think a public forum is the appropriate way of doing that. My familiarity with their work suggests that they're way overburdened and probably would be a good thing for them to be able to focus more. That's the only caveat I have. I think it's a good idea. I'm not much into organization charts, but when I look at it, there's something like 24 different departments listed on the city website. I don't know how on earth you manage to manage them, and some are kind of overlaps, and some are sub-departments, but they look like departments, and that's always been something that struck me as kind of odd. It's hard, I think, for the citizen, even for this alderman, after many years, to know exactly who to go to, and that's gotten better over the years, and I think this will be another improvement, but you know, the layout isn't at all intuitive, and I think this makes it more intuitive. You know, in the old organizational literature, used to talk about a span of control, where a manager would have control of 5 or at most 7 people. If you have to be in charge of 24 people, I'm not quite sure how that can be done effectively. So anything I think we can do to streamline, to narrow, to build accountability, and make it more performance-oriented would be a very good idea. On the surface, this strikes me as a very natural, logical kind of organization, and I'm really glad that you're moving forward with this. So I would be supportive of it. It looks good.
Thank you.
I'll also add that Mr. Berry has indicated some, I don't want to say frustration because it wasn't that strong, but the fact that he has 17 direct reports.
Right.
And that's, we've discussed that issue, and so I don't think this is the first organizational change that will be coming before the City Council as we try to make the city more efficient.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I may just make one quick comment to Alderman Padragula's statement. This was not done in a vacuum. I did incorporate Lance Lang, the acting interim planning director, Lance Meyer, our city engineer, who currently oversees the building department, and also Mitch Flanagan in the conversations. We've had several of those conversations, went through several iterations. This is what we've been doing for the last 4 to 5 weeks. So this was a collaborative process, and also reaching out and getting the input of the mayor on this as well. So I wanted to make sure that was widely known as well.
Any other questions for Mr. Berry? Alderman Wolski.
Mr. Berry will be recruiting for this, perhaps hiring a headhunter, the same as we have for some of the other positions in the past?
That's highly likely, Alderman Wolski. We do want to do a very good advertisement and marketing for this position so that we do get the right position. You know, consider that an investment, right? The more we invest and the better we invest, you know, the more likely we'll get the right person for the position. So we do have some salary savings from the vacancy that was created when Mr. Davis left. We'll plan to use those salary savings to do a full recruitment for the position.
Further questions for Mr. Berry? Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Berry.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just continue really quickly. Wanted to touch base. We're continuing the conversation of employees. I wanted to just give some recognition to Mr. Lance Meyer and also Ms. Christine Johnson. They were just recently certified as floodplain managers for the city. This is exceptional because what this does is it'll allow us to earn 10 additional points in the community rating system reclassification, and of course that translates into an additional discount on flood insurance premiums. So as we do all of this work on flood protection projects, we are also doing what we can to mitigate the rising costs of or anticipated rising costs of flood insurance premiums throughout our community. And so I want to personally thank Mr. Meyer and Ms. Johnson for their continuing education and stepping up and getting this certification for our community. With that, we have a few more accomplishments. The Downtown Improvement Project, led by Mr. Meyer's group, did win an American Council of Engineering Companies, or ACEC, award for water and wastewater. It also won the Gold Award in the Streetscape category by the North Dakota Ready Mix and Concrete Products Association. Also, the Hazard Mitigation Project did win the same Gold Award in government by the North Dakota Ready Mix and Concrete Products Association. So hats off to our engineering department and also our public works department for outstanding public service and public projects that contributed to the advancement of our community. Continuing on, wanted to let you know, we had a department retreat in December. I mentioned it briefly in January, but as we were consolidating information, I wanted to try to pull that together so I could share some of that with you. In our department retreat, one of the tasks we had as a team was to identify what are some focus areas that we would like to see improved as a city. There was no shortage of ideas, and of course you can see the list is pretty lengthy here. I wanted to get this, I won't read it all to you, but I wanted to get this list in front of you because it's a lot of the same things that are on your list. And so what we will be doing as time allows is we'll begin working on this list and this focus area, if you will. And I think what will happen later in the year, probably after the election, as we get some strategic planning and visioning going on, we'll then be able to prioritize these focus areas and begin putting resources and time to them as time and resources allow. So I wanted to share that with you. Lastly, I also wanted to mention that we've developed performance teams as part of our work in trying to restructure how we approach what we do for the city and the community. As you know, we have very strong department heads in our city who are absolutely 100% dedicated to their jobs and their departments. But where I think we're a little weak is in the cross-departmental side of our activities. And so I've created cross-functional teams. And these teams are here, won't go through necessarily all the detail here, but we've developed a workforce development team, a community engagement team, a finance improvements team, and also a municipal operations team. The details there with regard to what each of those teams is focused on, who the membership of the teams are, and then kind of the types of things that they'll be working on. Right now, essentially the goal for each of these teams is to pick one of these areas that will have the biggest and best impact cross-functionally on our organization, and to begin to put together plans and strategies on advancing that work. So there's a lot more to come on this. We're just getting started. I'm trying to be sensitive. We are all extremely busy. Resources are limited, and we do understand that. So we're going to do what we can to advance this work as we can over this next year, in addition to all of the other duties and assignments that we have in our various functional areas. So I wanted to share that with you as well as we attempt to try to bring more cross-functional engagement to our work. There is going to be a fifth team at some point in time, and this will be driven after we have a city council retreat that really focuses on vision and planning and strategy. So we'll deal with that at some point in time, but that would be a fifth team in the future. I wanted to also take this opportunity to let you know this is the growing list of projects and activities that the City Council has assigned to staff since August of last year. I'm pleased to report we've got 2 things done on this list so far. We have number 10 and we have number 11, the snake ordinance and then the feeding of wildlife ordinance done. I think you'll entertain those later this evening. But we still have quite a bit of work to do. Some of these activities are going to take us some time. These are all in addition to the regular duties that we have going on. So I just want to keep this in front of you and ask for your patience as we work through the list, because some of these activities can take significant investments in time and resources. So just wanted to keep that at the forefront as well. I also wanted to touch base really quickly on employee retention and kind of skim through this as a primer for an upcoming workshop I'd like for you to consider. Essentially, our retention rate's about, essentially 14.8% or almost 15%. We had 63 departures in 2017. Here's how those departures essentially look like. 8 of them were retirement-based. 55 were either resignations or terminations. We did expect a turnover rate of about 10.4%, but unfortunately in the last 3 months of the year, we went from that projection to about 4.5% higher. So we're looking into that and why that may be. Additionally, I wanted to share with you we had these 18 additional staff members leave in that last 3 months. One of them was a termination, but 17 were related to resignations. The turnover rate in 2015 and 16 was dropping consistently year over year, but then if we had kept a turnover at about 10.4%, which is what we expected for 17, that would have been our 3rd straight year of reductions, which is good, but unfortunately our rate ended up being higher for 2017. I wanted to share with you sort of what that means in 2 of our departments, particularly public safety departments. The police department's running a 14% annual turnover rate for the last 7 years. That's significant. We've hired 81 new officers since 2010. That's essentially the entire workforce. Now, although it isn't the entire workforce, it's the equivalent of the entire workforce. The last 2 hiring attempts that the police department ran didn't achieve the results we hoped as it related to viable candidates. And then the statistics are here on your right for the police department. The patrol officers, we have 46 police officer positions that are assigned to patrol. The mean average years of experience is 3.6. The median, that's the middle, is 2.3. And what's significant is as we turn over our workforce, the number of years of institutional knowledge goes down, and that's a concern. We have 19 street officers that currently have less than 2 years of experience, and 6 months of those 2 years were in training. So significant numbers. We have similar situation here on the fire department side. They are running about a 10% annual turnover rate in the past 7 years. 65 new firefighters have been hired since 2010. Again, that's likened to almost the entire workforce. They're leaving for various reasons, their fire department positions with either greater pay or benefits or out to the oil fields or whatever. The cost to train a firefighter is estimated about $72,000. So every time we turn a person over, we lose that money as well. The oil field did draw out many mid-level personnel with 10 to 15 years experience, and of course that drops the number of average years of experience that the workforce has. So that information here is over on the right-hand side as well. So we do have pretty big concerns as it relates to recruitment and retention, and this is just in the public safety side. We do see some similar trends in other areas of our operation as well. Just to finish up on the fire department side, 65 sworn personnel. Today we're currently short 7 members in the fire department. One's a fire marshal and 6 are firefighters. We did have firefighter testing process in September 2017 where we did hire 7 We are going to have another testing process next month. We hope to hire 6 personnel. 41 people or firefighters in the fire department have less than 5 years of service. Again, that institutional knowledge is key, and particularly the training knowledge. The average years of service for Minot's fire department is 7.7. Just comparing that to Bismarck, and that's just one data point, it's 13 and a half years. So we have had difficulty recruiting candidates and then also keeping candidates as well. So with that, I wanted to just move on, and you saw the email I sent out last week asking for a council retreat in March or April. We have moved that to April. March time, there's a lot of activities going on. So we're looking at Wednesday, April 4th. Most of you have responded is very good. Hasn't been set just yet, but it's looking like Wednesday, April 4th, we will have council retreat. I'm going to call it a workshop because I think that's really what it's going to mostly be like. We will be focused mostly on operational and budget policy issues. Some of the data that I've just provided you will be represented along with the entire organization. We can talk about some of that organizational policy moving forward. I'm imagining about a half-day workshop, and the location will certainly be in town someplace, which we haven't announced. So that's coming, and I'll get you more details on that as we proceed. Lastly, or close to last, just a reminder of the State of the City address on February the 8th, 4:15 at the Magic City campus, officially starting at 5 o'clock. For the open house is at 4:15. This will be really exciting, I think, for our community and certainly for our city, so hope to see you all there. And then lastly, hopefully if everything goes right, when you sit in your chairs next month at the next City Council meeting, we'll have a fairly sophisticated AV experience for the viewing public at home and also hopefully for the members in the audience and whatnot. So you may recall that we did receive a $70,000 disbursement from the Community Development Fund or the Community Facilities Fund, and that project will be going to improve the audio-visual capabilities of this room. So we'll have higher quality broadcasts, we'll have hearing impairment improvements, ADA improvements, including a ramp for those who may have accessibility issues that want to serve in our community. We'll have a visual document component so that folks can present a document to you and have it displayed on your screens here. We'll have a number of different other improvements. So a new podium that will be more conducive to, will be ADA compliant, and it'll also be more conducive to making presentations as well. So we're pretty excited about that, and there's a possibility that it may take a little longer than we anticipate, but we do hope to have this done by the next council meeting. So with that, I'll stop for questions that you might have, and otherwise be done.
Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mayor Barney. Tom, my first question is, or maybe before the community outreach regarding the landfill, I think folks are also curious to know what Trinity is considering, where their thoughts are on the whole landfill process. I appreciate that we're going to reach out and go through a process, and I think that those folks in that area are really going to be keen on how much is it going to cost us to possibly relocate the landfill. Be that cost, however that's going to shake out down the road, but I think we need to be aware going into it that the compromise might not be there, and be that whoever wants to sell that concept to the larger public down the road, if we're going to consider moving the landfill and we're going to have all the costs laid out. I'm just curious as well of what Trinity, when they consider building a big hospital, what their thoughts are. I've heard different comments to me in phone calls, but I expect that you probably have better insight to that, so I think that's one thing to bring to that conversation. My second question is, do we have city staff lined up to go to the Main Street initiative next week?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Straight, I'll answer your second question first. Yes, we do. We have 2 staff members, myself and Mr. Lance Lang, that will be going to the summit, and then 2 elected officials, Alderman Sitma and Mayor Barney, will be attending as well.
I appreciate that, having been to the one in Fargo last year, and I'm going to still try to sneak in and go next week, but it's important that we have city staff at these functions when they take place, so I appreciate that. And I guess one other thought, and I'm pretty idealistic, but I'm very sensitive to the residents here that have found themselves in a situation where your homes were constructed and you found yourself in a bit of a morass. We have NDR dollars out there. We're talking about a revolving loan fund. According to Mr. Zakian's email this past week, we're not building new multifamily homes at the construction. If there's any way that we can factor in a revolving loan fund to fix some of the past errors, I think all of us up here weren't sitting here when these mistakes were made. But I feel for you folks. I will tell you that I went through a building permit in 2014 and I had 14 inspections. So I appreciate city staff. I think they work hard. They're doing the best they can. Unfortunately for you folks, that gives you no solace now. But I think all of us up here feel for you. And Tom, if we can figure out some way, if we're going to look at a revolving loan fund through NDR, if there's a way to have these folks worked into that fold somehow to fix some of their building issues so they can unload their properties, I think that's something that we need to consider, so, for what it's worth.
Any other questions for Mr. Berry on his report? Alderman Patriggula.
More in the nature of a comment, I guess 3 short things, and I want to do this publicly rather than privately. I would talk to you privately, Tom, but I'm very impressed with what I'm hearing. This is a very mature, very sophisticated look at the issues that are facing the city, not just this month, but for a long term. And I'm very pleased with that for you and your staff who put that together. I've been on the council on and off since 1998, and from that perspective, it really is very nice to see what's happening now. The one downside I have, the one concern I have, and here I'll be speaking more as a psychologist than an alderman, is I'm concerned about burnout. The department heads and other staff I've worked with, and certainly you yourself, work very, very long hours. One morning, I think it was a Saturday, I guess it was a weekday, I got an email from the engineering department head at 6 in the morning. Right. I appreciate his diligence, but I worry about that, and I'm glad you're giving us a list of where you're at with these projects, and I guess I would just encourage you to pace yourselves. We put so much on your shoulders and the shoulders of your staff, and I want to make sure we don't have a problem with that.
Before you move on, I want to comment on that because I think that the reason why those things are placed on their shoulders is because this body directed to them. And I think that we need to start doing a better job of prioritizing our requests.
Exactly.
And maybe gathering input from the senior management in the city as to what their priorities should be regarding those additional tasks that we're coming up with.
Exactly,
Sorry.
exactly, and that would be part of the management. I mean, we're their bosses in a sense, and it is our responsibility, our obligation to lay out the vision and lay out the priorities and give them some parameters to work within. The final thing I wanted, well, I guess 2 things I wanted to say. One was about this landfill thing. I think it was pretty embarrassing on the front page of the paper to read that something the city had been working for many years has hit a red light, has hit a roadblock. And I think the way that the city now is responding to it, the city being the administration, particularly you and your staff, is a very good one. Instead of charging ahead, I think we may have had some tunnel vision, limited tunnel vision, to be honest with you. But instead of charging ahead and being defensive about this, I think stepping back, stopping, taking a look, re-engaging with the community is the way to go. I was impressed with some parts of the proposal. I really liked the idea of all the trees and shelter belts to hide the proposed bigger landfill. I wish it could have been some berms. So there were some good things there. But I think the big point to me is that we're taking this in a positive way. We're reassessing. We're not just charging ahead. We're not blaming. We're not denying. We're not retreating. We're looking at it in the way I think an organization should look at it. So I'm very pleased with that. The final comment would be in terms of staff. This turnover issue continues to be disturbing to me. And I think the average citizen and the average alderman needs to know what the practical implications are. You can't do your job if you can't do it well, at least, without experience. I work a lot in the public safety field, and I know there's a huge difference between an officer who's been on the street 1 or 2 years and someone who's been there 10 or 20 years. And it's a day-to-day thing. When I did my ride-along with the fire people in October, I spent an entire shift with them. And the battalion chief and several of his captains spent about an hour trying to figure out how to staff the fire stations and the pieces of equipment. because people weren't certified for this, or they didn't have that training, or whatever. So the time they spent on higher order tasks was spent trying to figure out where to put these people. And that happens again and again and again, and it's a tremendous inefficiency. So there are a lot of things that happen when we can't fill positions and when there's a lot of turnover. And some of these things are silent. You don't see them unless you really know how services are delivered. So I wish you the best in this process, and again, I just wanted to publicly compliment you and your senior staff for the changes I've seen in the past almost 20 years.
Thank you, sir.
Further comments on Mr. Berry's presentation? Seeing no one, you're completed.
Thanks.
City Attorney report.
Mayor, members of the council, I submitted a